What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today it's time to do a review of a scenario pack. Now, we've done a couple reviews so far of hero packs in Marvel Champions. I think it is about time we did a review of a scenario pack, and there's only two that we've actually had released so far. And the best one of them, far and away, is the Green Goblin. Here's what's weird though. It is full-on two scenarios, as in it is literally two separate scenarios with separate cards that play very differently. One is better than the others. Let's get rolling, and we'll start off with Risky Business. Now, Risky Business is really cool because the villain flips just like the hero does. You have Norman Osborn and you have Green Goblin, but you also have an environment card, Criminal Enterprise. Well, Criminal Enterprise one side, State of Madness on the other. And essentially, you start off with Norman Osborn and with Criminal Enterprise, and then you essentially have to get rid of all the infamy counters to flip the environment over to State of Madness, whereupon you fight the Green Goblin, and in theory, you can then win. You see, Norman Osborn does not attack. Norman Osborn can only scheme. And anytime Norman Osborn would attack, you place infamy counters on Criminal Enterprise instead. 1 if it's stage 1, 2 stage 2, 3 stage 3. So Norman Osborn is trying to build up infamy counters onto Criminal Enterprise, so Norman stays around and Norman schemes, and the scheme is quite high. 2 for stage 1 and 2, and 3 when you get up to stage 3. Ouch. And when Norman Osborn would take any amount of damage, you remove that many infamy cards from Criminal Enterprise instead. Oh. You see, what you're trying to do when Norman Osborn is out, you are trying to damage him to get Green Goblin out so that you can attack Green Goblin, and Norman Osborn is trying to pile infamy counters onto Criminal Enterprise so that all he's doing is sitting around scheming. So as the hero, what you want to try and do a lot of the time here is actually stick yourself in hero mode so that your opponent, the villain, cannot scheme, and then whittle them down till Green Goblin comes out. Now, when Green Goblin comes out, we end up with State of Madness, which has 2 madness counters on, and when they run out, you go back to Criminal Enterprise and Norman Osborn. So Green Goblin can only attack, and when it would scheme, you remove madness counters instead. 1 for stage 1 and 2, and 2 on stage 3. So Green Goblin trying to remove those madness counters, so to get back to Norman Osborn, you cannot defeat Norman Osborn, you can only defeat the Green Goblin. Here's where it gets really tricky and awkward though. You see, when you get Green Goblin out, you take damage. And this is why I was referring to staying in hero mode earlier. Now, Green Goblin stage 1, when it's revealed, you deal 3 indirect damage to each player in hero form. So that can basically be avoided by being in alter ego form and taking out the last couple of infamy counters by doing damage with an ally or a direct card. But when you get to stage 2, when it comes out, you just deal 4 indirect damage to each player, regardless of which mode they're in. Same thing for stage 3, incidentally. So what that means is that when you've moved on to the 2nd or 3rd stage, every time Green Goblin comes out, you're taking 4 damage. So you don't just have to try and keep Green Goblin as Green Goblin so you can take it down. You have to keep it as Green Goblin so you're not taking lots of indirect damage. Now, the other main part of this scenario is, of course, the scheme. The scheme isn't anything too special. Stage 1 of the scheme puts an extra 1 threat on per person, and when it's completed, you place 1 infamy counter per player onto Criminal Enterprise, and then discard 1 card from each player's deck for each infamy counter on Criminal Enterprise. Again, it is all about the villain keeping the infamy counters on there, and you trying to get rid of them by dealing damage to Norman Osborn. You do not want stage 1 to complete. Most of the villains, I don't really care if they complete stage 1. This one I absolutely care a lot. Because you see, it's not only that, but 2B of corporate acquisition, this is the second scheme, is harsh. Firstly, you get an extra encounter card per turn. Secondly, you take 2 threat per person, rather than 1 at the beginning of every villain phase. That is absolutely brutal. If corporate acquisition comes out, you're in a lot of trouble, quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen. You are absolutely in a lot of trouble. Try and avoid it, would you? Now, if we look at the kind of other cards, there are some minions here. Private Security Specialist has Guard, so you have to attack it before you go after the villain. But if it appears as a boost icon, you place 1 infamy counter on Criminal Enterprise or remove 1 madness counter. Either you're getting Norman Osborn back or you're making him stay around longer. Hired Gun has 2 scheme and 2 attack, which is pretty high for a minion. And when it's revealed, you can either give the villain 1 face down boost card or place 2 infamy counters on Criminal Enterprise. It's all about the infamy counters. And then the boost is exactly the same as it was for Private Security Specialist. We've got some side schemes here. Collapsing Bridge you have to take down before you go after the main scheme. And it's got that same boost of placing an infamy counter or removing a madness counter. Oscorp Manufacturing gives an acceleration token. And when it's revealed a Norman Osborn is there, you take an additional threat per player. And then Payoff gives you an extra encounter card. And it's got that same boost whereby you place an infamy counter or remove a madness counter. We've also got All in a Day's Work that when revealed you place 2 infamy counters on Criminal Enterprise or remove 2 madness counters from State of Madness, and it's got the usual boost. And Mad Genius, when it is revealed and Green Goblin is out, Goblin attacks a hero with the fewest hit points remaining, and when it's revealed and Norman Osborn is out, you discard the top card of your deck for each infamy counter on Criminal Enterprise. And remember, when you run out of cards in your hero deck, you have to deal an encounter card. That's not ideal. And this is a very, very awkward scenario to play. What you're doing all the way through, there's quite a few minions and side schemes you're having to navigate. But it is all about trying to get rid of the infamy counters, and more so than most, I am really trying to stay in hero mode, and I am really trying to stop my opponent getting to the second stage of the scheme, because it really gets harsh when they do. And if Goblin is coming out dealing 4 damage to each player, that adds up super quickly. I was playing around with this with Black Widow yesterday. Black Widow's only got 9 hit points, and the out-of-the-box deck really doesn't have much healing at all. That 4 damage is huge. But you see, it's not actually just all about that. There are 2 separate scenarios, and the other one is the Mutagen formula. It's still Green Goblin, but it is a completely separate scenario. From a value standpoint, this is ridiculous and phenomenal and awesome. You're getting 2 complete scenarios and a bunch of encounter sets. We'll get there in a moment. As a side note, I think the Mutagen formula is the better of the 2. Risky Business can be a very awkward one to play, but then by the same token, you will get games where you can stay in hero mode. There's not really any scheming going on because you're in hero mode, and you're blocking lots, and it's not always that difficult when you're up and rolling, but that is a big if. If you can stay in hero mode, you're good, because Norman isn't scheming. You've just got Goblin out, and Goblin isn't scheming, but Goblin does do a lot of damage, so do watch it. But moving over properly then into Mutagen formula, what we see here is a villain that doesn't flip. Now, it's got a forced response regardless of which stage you're in. After Green Goblin attacks and damages you, you place threat on the main scheme. 1 for the first 2 stages and 2 for stage 3. Try and avoid the Green Goblin damaging you, would ya? Now, when Stage 2 is revealed, you deal 2 encounter cards to each player. When Stage 3 is revealed, you deal 3 encounter cards to each player. And essentially what this is a huge punishment for taking down each stage of the villain. Because make no mistake about it, right? Dealing 2 or 3 encounter cards or taking 2 or 3 encounter cards can literally lose you the game because the villain ends up scheming loads or attacking loads or just deals so much damage you cannot cope and you cannot get around it. This is not an easy scenario, but it's kind of difficult in a fun way. Also, you'll notice that the Green Goblin has pretty high attack. When you combine the high attack with the fact that Scheme gets added when Goblin damages you, i.e. you can't do the usual trick of staying in hero mode and just dealing with the 1 threat per turn, and the encounter cards, it all adds up pretty gosh darned quickly. Now, if we have a look at the scheme here, we've got Unleashing the Mutagen to start off with. During setup, you have to take a Goblin Thrall minion and put it into play engaged with each player. And when you complete Unleashing the Mutagen, each player not engaged with a Goblin minion must discard 3 cards from the encounter deck and put the first Goblin minion they discarded this way into play engaged with them. You will sometimes get lucky and not hit a Goblin minion, but sometimes you will, and that's very, very sad. And if you haven't guessed it now, let me say it out loud. This is very, very much the minion scenario. Now, moving over into Mutagen Cloud, you take extra threat onto the scheme equal to the number of Goblin enemies, including Green Goblin, in play. So if there are no minions whatsoever, you're just taking the usual 1 threat per turn. All the minions here are Goblins. There are many, many of them in the scenario. And if you're unlucky, you can be taking 3, 4, 5 threat per player every turn here. Believe me when I say that is going to add up extremely quickly. So, speaking of the minions, what do we get? Well, there are some more generic ones. There's a bunch of Goblin soldiers. 1 scheme, 1 attack, 5 health. But if it comes out as a boost card, Goblin soldier goes into play engaged with you. And when you defeat them, you have to take 1 damage, which is incredibly harsh. The other generic one is Goblin Thrall. 1 scheme, 1 attack, 3 health, so quite a bit weaker, though there are actually 6 of them in the deck. It's got guards, so you have to take them down before you go after Green Goblin. And it's got a boost icon, which says you put it into play engaged with you. This scenario will often lead you engaged with many, many minions. I have done solo games where I've been engaged with like 6 minions before. They can come out very high. And remember that when you defeat each stage of the Green Goblin, you basically deal a bunch of encounter cards. A lot of the time, those encounter cards will be minions, and then they will be engaged with you. And if you don't have a way to take them down nice and easily, this is very much one of those scenarios that can get completely out of hand extremely quickly. Now, there are some what I like to refer to as more special minions here. So we've got Goblin Knight, 2 scheme, 2 attack, 7 health, which is huge. As a boost, after this activation ends, you shuffle it into the encounter deck. So if it comes out as a boost card, it goes back in the deck and it's going to come out again later, boo, hiss, etc. But after Goblin Knight attacks you, you discard 1 card from the encounter deck, and if it is a Goblin minion, bearing in mind much of the encounter deck will be Goblin minions, you put it into play engaged with you. And this is what I'm basically saying about all of these cards here. What we're saying is this is very much the minion part of, well, the minion scenario, I suppose. This is the full-on, unabashed minion scenario. And you will be engaged with minion after minion after minion. And that is one of the big challenges with this particular encounter, this particular scenario. you are going to have to manage trying to take down all of those minions while not letting the villain overrun you, bearing in mind the villain has very, very high attack. Now, there is also one monster in there, 1 scheme, 3 attack, 6 health, and when revealed, it stuns you, and if you're already stunned, you take 2 damage. And similarly to what we saw with Goblin Knight, as a boost icon, it gets essentially shuffled back into the deck. We then see a couple of side schemes coming out just for good measure. Goblin Nation, there's a bunch of these, and when it's revealed, you place 1 additional threat on it for each Goblin minion in play. Only minions, not for Green Goblin. That could still be 3, 4, 5 or more, and you take an extra encounter card every turn. Goblin Nation, each Goblin enemy gets +1 attack. That's going to add up extremely quickly, and as it comes out as a boost, it gets put into play. And Overrun gives you 2 acceleration tokens, and when you defeat it, each player must discard 2 cards in the encounter deck, and put each Goblin minion they discarded this way into play engaged with them. But you can't not take it out because it's giving 2 acceleration tokens. Like I said, this is the minion scenario. Now, elsewhere in the scenario, you've got Goblin Glider, which gives +1 attack, and you attach it to the enemy with the highest printed hit points, and without another Goblin Glider attached, just gives you +1 attack. You can spend 2 energy resource to discard it, but until then, it just gives them an extra 1 attack. We've got Death from Above, where in Alter Ego, Green Goblin schemes with extra scheme equal to the villain's stage number, or attacks with extra attack equal to the stage number. I See You is a treachery that says Green Goblin attacks you. If you're in Alter Ego form, it still attacks you, but you don't give it a boost card, which is harsh. Also, right, if it comes out as a boost card, you get +1 boost icon for each Goblin minion engaged with you, which could lead your villain to be scheming or attacking for like 7 or 8, which is huge. Overconfidence, when you're in Alter Ego mode, Green Goblin schemes, and if at least 3 threat was placed, it gains Surge, you get another encounter card. And Hero mode, Green Goblin attacks you, and if at least 3 damage was dealt, this card gains Surge. And then Wicked Ambitions, when it is revealed, you discard cards from the encounter deck equal to the villain's stage number, and every time a Goblin minion is discarded, you either put it into play with you, or take 3 damage. And hopefully what you can see, we've just run through all the cards in the scenario, it goes for it. It gives you so many minions, and it is like fighting fires playing this sometimes, but that is why I prefer it way, way more. When I'm playing Risky Business, what I end up finding is I try and stick in hero mode, using allies and blocking when I have to, and just whittling down Green Goblin, trying to make sure it never turns back into Norman Osborn. When I'm playing Mutagen Formula, it is a mad dash to try and take down the hideous amount of minions that are coming out super regularly, and I find that a more engaging scenario. Let's be clear here, the phenomenal value comes from the fact you've got 2 full scenarios that can be played over and over again, and are genuinely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Now, the other thing that's really cool about this scenario pack is that you get yourself a bunch of modular sets. So you get yourself 4 modular sets in here. Goblin Gimmicks, we're going to run through these a little bit more quickly because we're getting on a bit here. Goblin Gimmicks basically gives you a couple of extra Goblin Gliders, which we've seen. A couple of Pumpkin Bombs, which deals damage to you when you're attacked. A couple of Intimidation, which give you extra boost cards, and a couple of Regenerative Healing, which, shockingly enough, let them heal. That's what they generally tell you to use, but they've given you 3 extra modular sets, which are there. And as an old school Spider-Man fan, I appreciate this, because what we've basically got is Spider-Man villains. So you've got a mess of things, which is built around Scorpion, which attacks when it engages, Free scheme, free attack, 7 health is pretty big, and it stuns every time it damages you. That's kind of harsh. Power Drain is built around Electro. Stats are not quite as high, but after Electro attacks you, you discard 1 card from the encounter deck and take 1 indirect damage for each boost icon discarded this way. So whereas Scorpion is stunning you, Electro can really pile on the cheeky damage here. And Tombstone comes around with 9 health, which is gigantic, but it is Tombstone. And after he attacks and damages you, you have to discard either a science resource or a physical resource from your hand if you're able to do so. So this is a gigantic HP hand disruption minion, which is added into the deck. And in terms of a review here, all I can tell you is if you like Marvel Champions, this is an absolute must-buy. I would not refer to any of the hero packs as a must-buy. I think some of them, like Doctor Strange, are phenomenal, but you don't need them. But I don't care which hero you like playing with, at the end of the day, you're gonna need more villains to play against, and this is 2 full scenarios, 4 modular sets, and I absolutely adore it. It is the best value in the Marvel Champions card game. It's a 5 Wossy set, and I don't even have to think about it. And after all of that long explanation, it's over to you guys. Have you got this set? Have you played with it? What are your impressions? Let me know. Go nuts. Be nice. And if you haven't bought it, might be time to do so. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at the Wossy, where we talk Marvel Champions and a whole bunch of other games. And please do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCGradio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts, all kinds of fun stuff. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wossy Plays.